Welcome to Rosebud Homestead. We just finished our video on making apple pie filling and water bath canning it, and we're going to do something with the leftovers when we come right back. So these are the leftovers in my jam pan, the cores and the peelings from 6 quarts of apple slices that we use to make our pie filling. Now, because we don't like to waste anything around here, we are going to turn this into apple core jelly. Now, we're not going to finish it today. We have too much going today, but we're going to get it going because I didn't want this to sit out any longer. So I'm going to go, I have some water in here. You can see I've got water almost covering it. And I have a pan that almost fits. This jam pan did not come with a lid. This is as best as I can do, and it will work just fine. So we're going to put this on the stove and cook this until it's just absolutely soft and mushy. And when we get to that point, we'll come back and I'll show you what we're going to do. The apples have been, well, the apple leavings have been simmering over on the stove for about 2 hours. And you can take a look. They are cooked and cooked and cooked through and through. So now what we want to do is drain all of the juices off. And so I have this colander set right inside the this is my pasta pan, and it works, it's a multi-use pan, and it's wonderful. So I'm just going to move these things over here and let it drip into this pan. We want all the good juices. I'll get most of this stuff in here, then I'm just going to dump. And I am not a purist when it comes to jelly. I'm perfectly happy for there to be a little bit of the fruit flesh in the jelly. It's not quite jam, but this won't be totally clear like some jellies are. And then I'm just going to kind of mash this down to get some of the more juices. And this makes it for sure that it will not be clear when I mash it down like this. But some of the flesh is quite flavorful. Notice how when I mash it, it's just turning to mush, which is fine. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to let this drain for another couple of hours, and that's as far as I'm going to go today. So once this is drained as much as I want it to, then I'm going to pour this into quart jars, and it looks like I might have about 1.5 quarts of juice in there. And then we will come back later in the week and finish off the jelly. So we will see you in a few days when we come back to it. It has been a few days since I put these in the refrigerator. We got 2 quarts of liquid from the apples. I'll tell you, every time I opened up the refrigerator, they were just staring at me, making me feel guilty about why I hadn't done it sooner. So today is the day that we're going to go ahead and finish this off. So I'm going to open up these 2 quarts. They may have, actually they may have sealed, because when I put them in the jars, it was very hot. These are already used lids, so it's not like it's a great seal, but they did pop down. Okay, so here's my jam pan, and I'm just going to notice that we have some settling of stuff down at the bottom. So I'm going to pour a little bit out. And then I'm going to stick the lid back on here and sort of shake it up to get everything in there, and then pour the rest in. And then do the same with this one. That way we get all of the good parts in. So here's what is going to happen next. I'm going to put this on the stove and bring it to a boil. Once it's up to a good rolling boil, then I'm going to add 4 cups of sugar. Now this was 8 cups of juice. So I'm going to start with 4 cups of sugar. Now these were green apples, the Granny Smith apples. Green apples have more pectin than other apples do, so I'm hoping that there is already enough pectin in this juice for it to work. However, after I boil it with the sugar for a little bit, if it doesn't start to reach the gel point, I have an extra 2 cups of sugar that I may add a little bit later. And then I have a half a cup of lemon juice that I'm also going to add. So I'm going to move over to the refrigerator. No, not the refrigerator. I'm going to move over to the stove and get this to boiling, and we will bring you back when I'm ready to add the sugar. So this is almost to a good solid rolling boil that I can't stir down. As soon as it gets there, then we will put the sugar in. I have the sugar right here ready. All right, this is good enough. So I'm just going to dump it all in at once. And I'm going to put the lemon juice in. The purpose of the lemon juice is to make sure we have enough acidity so that I can water bath can, and also to add a little more pectin. So I'm going to stir this until the sugar is dissolved, and then we'll bring this back up to a good rolling boil again and let it boil until it gets to the gel point. We don't want it to burn on the bottom while the sugar is dissolving. It looks very pretty. It's a pretty golden color. Some people add food coloring to their apple peeling jelly. With some apples, of course, the liquid is more red. But I actually quite like natural, so we're going to leave it just the way it turns out, whatever that might be. All right, so this is going to take a few more minutes to get this back up, so I'll bring you back in when it is to a rolling boil again, now with all the sugar in it. So this is coming right along. It's about up to a rolling boil again. I'm sure that it is going to have to boil like this for 15 or 20 minutes before the pectin is activated. Some people say you should not stir after it comes to a boil. I always like to double check to be sure the bottom isn't burning, and it is not. This jam pan has a very heavy bottom. So that is the type of a boil right there that we want. Jam or jelly has to be boiled hard. It is the heat, the sugar, the acid that kicks the pectin into gear. All right, we'll come back periodically. Sometimes when you get really good at making jam or jelly, you can begin to tell the difference in how the liquid is boiling. Now, I boiled this for a good 15 minutes and it wasn't even changing. And so that told me that, first of all, I didn't have enough sugar in there, so the pectin, the natural pectin in the apple juice that we got from the peels and cores, it wasn't strong enough to react with the sugar and the heat. So I added an extra cup of sugar, and now I'm getting this foam. So this is actually a good sign once it foams up like this. So we still need to boil this for a little while longer. I'm going to give it another 15 minutes. If it still has not changed consistency, if it hasn't thickened up a little bit, I will add that last cup of sugar. I just took this baking sheet of our jars out of the oven, so they are sanitized. And here is the jam. I took it off the stove, I wanted to show you the quick little test that I gave it right here on this plate. This plate was in the freezer, and I ran my finger through it, and when after it cools, when that does not run back together again, when it leaves a freeway through the middle, that means it's pretty much done. So we're done, and I'm going to now pour this into the jars. This is just beautiful. I'm using some Weck jars and some ball jars. So I'm going to start over here with the Weck jars. And it is just clear and beautiful. And I want this almost to the top. And it looks like I'm going to have enough for maybe one more, possibly two. Woo! Uh-oh, I spilled on that one. And this is forming a skin. That skin slips in there, and it will be just fine. It just means that that part has set up. And that's good enough. All right, now I'm going to run this paper towel around the tops of everything. That one is too full. And the good thing about doing water bath canning with these, and I'm just going to put these in long enough to just have the vacuum seal set. So it'll be about 10 minutes is all we need. And the good thing about water bath canning is that these jars will come out very clean. Okay. And you know, I just don't like this scum on here either. I'm going to pull that off. And then do this. Okay, these have cooled down enough. Here are the gaskets. I'm just putting the gaskets on the underside of the lid, and then I'm just putting the lids on the top. And I am going to put a couple of clips on these, making sure that it's fastened down correctly. These are just gorgeous. Look how pretty that is. Just as clear as can be. And that's what we want jelly to be, which is pretty amazing that we did that. I mean, I think. Ooh. I've boiled these little gaskets on the stove for about 3 minutes, so they're nice and warm. Invert and attach the clips. Now I'm going to be doing the water bath in my Instant Pot. And I'm not sure all of these jars are going to fit in there, so we'll do what we can. This really looks a lot like our honey. And this was all natural pectin. I did have to add that extra cup of sugar, and boy, the minute I added that extra cup of sugar, that's what did the trick. It immediately started thickening, and I could tell the difference in the boil. It went from looking just like water boiling, all lively and active, to like lava boiling, which was gloopy and thicker. And so that's all it took. So this recipe, and you know it will vary depending on your apples, because apples will have varying amounts of natural pectin. I'm also making some of our artisan bread with Polish as a pre-ferment today. So when that bread comes out of the oven, here are these lids and rings, they've been washed and already. When it comes out of the oven and has cooled a little bit, guess what we'll be trying on some of that fresh baked bread. Oh, this just looks marvelous. And to think that we got all of this just from the cores and the peels from all of those Granny Smith apples. All right, now I learned before the best little tool to use to get these down in my Instant Pot is this grabber. And I have a little rack in there. I don't know if I can get one of these down in there. Well, I'll be darned. It worked. Okay, so I just have these two, and they will vacuum seal just like this, but I might keep those in the refrigerator just to be sure. So we will bring you back in about 10 minutes after these have boiled in this Instant Pot for 10 minutes. And then that's enough to make the vacuum seals seal, and so we'll be back. The timer just went off, so let's get these out. And again, this is only 10 minutes. All we need is just enough to be sure that the lids seal. Oh, this just popped. I thought I'd broken glass there for a second. Okay, so here they are. Now you can see by this little tongue tab that it is, most of them are pointing down nicely, downward, not like down, but downward. And so that's an indication that the vacuum is forming. And I always make sure when I put the clips on that the gasket has been flattened against the jars so that we are less likely to have any kind of a non-seal situation. Now I want to just talk briefly about a couple of things. First of all, these two did not get in the water bath. Now I could probably do those right now and they would be just fine. Or I could just leave them like this. Many people do not water bath their jam or jelly when they have sanitized the jars and the jars are just hot. And you may remember that we got our jars right out of the oven. Now I sterilize jars 3 different ways, and it just depends on what I'm doing in the moment to help me decide which way I want to do it. But for jams and jellies, I just usually always do it in the oven. And the reason being that I can get my oven up to 180 degrees. My dishwasher only goes to 140. 180 kills everything that we need to kill. Actually, I set it for 200 degrees, and then I keep them in there for 20 minutes or longer. These were in there for probably about 40 minutes by the time we got to them. And a lot of people say that, boy, when the jars are hot and the jam is hot and the lids were warm, just seal them up and they will be fine. And a lot of times they are. But do you know, for the first time in over 50 years of canning, the other day, I took a jar of plum jam that I had done that with off of our shelf and opened it up, and there was mold on the top. So I'm not going to do that anymore. Once was enough for me. So I can just leave these out, and then once these, and they will pop, and then once they do, I can put them in the refrigerator, or I can just put them in the water bath canner. And that is what I'm going to do. I want to be safe, and so these are going to go in the water bath canner. I'm going to need to add some water and bring that up, and I'll do all of that after we're done. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is instead of doing the little plate test that we did when you run your finger through it, some people also say the sure way of doing that is to bring it up to 220, which is the gel point. And that is all fine and good if you are at sea level. It will work. A candy thermometer will work for you if it is at sea level. You can get your jam up to 220, which is the gel point. But here on the Colorado Plateau, our boiling point is not 212. It's much below that. The higher the elevation, the lower the boiling point, because there is less air pressure for one thing. And so, if you want to actually use a thermometer instead of that little finger streak test on a cold plate, then what you would need to do is put a pot of water on the stove and put your candy thermometer in there and note at what temperature your water boils on that thermometer. And sometimes thermometers aren't all the same either. So test your water with a thermometer that you use and then add 8 degrees. 8 degrees above your boiling point is what the gel or the set point will be. So you can do that with a thermometer. I have found over my experience that for me, the sure way to do it is to just use a cold plate and then run my finger through it and see if I can make a freeway through the middle of the gloop. So this has been such fun. I haven't done apple peeling jelly for years. And so this is the first time I've had it turn out this gorgeous, gorgeous golden color. And while these were processing, Jim and I kind of licked the pan. There was a little bit left in the pan, and it is fabulous. I had no idea that Granny Smith apples would make such wonderful apple peeling jelly, but here you have it, and we're thrilled. So thanks for joining us, and those of you that have subscribed, thank you so much. We really appreciate that you have subscribed, and if you haven't, please do so. We would love to have you part of our Rose Red Homestead family. So we will see you next time.